So I'll give you a review of the different research designs that are commonly used right now in research. These are traditional designs in which this is always used, okay, especially in conducting research. So we have the quantitative research design. We involve uh, numerical data, and that particular numerical data based from the survey or based from our experiments, we can gather those particular data and generate conclusions, okay, out from the data that we have gathered. We also have qualitative research design. So in a qualitative research design, we collect non-numerical data. We conduct interview. We have in-depth interview to our participants. We conduct focus group discussion, like their experiences, their concepts, their opinions, and we record. Okay, we transcribe, we record those particular information. We form a code and the themes that will be extracted out from the information that we have obtained during the conduct of the interview. And we also have the mixed methods research design. This is collection and analysis and mixing of both quantitative and qualitative research data. So this particular mixed methods right now, although this is not new, it has been conducted even before, but of course, with the fast pace of research, a lot of researches already conducted. It's very difficult to establish novelty. So that is why many researchers opted to include mixed designs, both the qualitative and the quantitative component. So in a quantitative design, we have these common designs. We have descriptive research design. Okay. So if you wanted to know the characteristics, okay, of the variables or the phenomenon that we wanted to study, then we can perform the descriptive research design. So in a descriptive research design, this is a design that answers the question what, okay? Like for example, if the question is, what is the demographic profile of the students in our institution? Then this is descriptive in nature. We wanted to know um, how many are males, how many are females, what are their socioeconomic status. So if you want to describe the current status of the identified variable, like profile variable, then this is the descriptive um, design is utilized. And as what I have mentioned, in a research question, anything that starts with what is a descriptive, entails a descriptive design. So what is the level of satisfaction of the students? Okay, so that is a question that will entail a descriptive design because you just wanted to know what is the status, okay, what is the current status on that variable, like level of satisfaction. The other type is the correlational design. So correlational design determine the extent of relationship between two or more variables. We wanted to know whether they are associated, if X is associated with Y. Like for example, if the question is there a significant relationship between job satisfaction and work productivity of teachers? Okay, so we are correlating two variables there. We are associating whether they are linked to each other. So it will be tested through statistics, okay, like the Pearson R, and determine the strength and the direction of the relationship. So, for example, the results indicate that there is a significant relationship between job satisfaction and work productivity of teachers. And the results show a directly proportional relationship. It would mean that if there is an increase in job satisfaction, it would also likely increase the work productivity of teachers if the result is significant. So that is correlational research. If we want to link two or more variables, then we will utilize the correlational research design. The next is causal comparative, or sometimes this is called as quasi-experimental research. So this causal comparative, it attempts to establish cause-effect relationship among the variables, attempting, okay, but this is not a true experimental design. So this is somewhat related to a true experimental design, but they have some differences because in that causal comparative or a quasi-experimental design, that the independent variable is not manipulated by the experimenter. Okay, and the effect of that independent variable on the dependent variable are measured. Okay, so we can measure that one through a certain statistical test, but there is no randomization. Okay, the researcher does not randomly assign group. Unlike in a true experimental design, there is a random selection kung saan dyan yung treatment group which are manipulated, and we have also the control group. Okay, so yun yung true experimental design. There is a random selection on the exposure whether that particular participants or subjects will be subject for treatment and will be subject for control group. So in a causal comparative, hindi ganyan. Okay, so that is the difference between a true experimental and a causal comparative or a quasi-experimental design. Like for example, if like the pre-test and post-test design, um, I will conduct a feeding program in a certain community. Kunyari, meron tayong community extension. Before I will conduct the feeding program, I will measure first the BMI of the children that will qualify as participants of the study. So after I get the BMI, without yet implementing the feeding program, that is just a baseline status. That's the pre-test. Then after which, I will introduce the program within 1 month, that there will be 3 days feeding program per week. And after a month, I will again measure the BMI. Okay. And with that, I can determine if there is a significant difference in the baseline and the post-test. So if there is a significant increase in the BMI with those particular children that are wasted or stunted, or those children that are actually malnourished, okay, undernourished. And if there is an improvement or change or a significant change, then I can say that my program is effective. Okay, so that is an example of a comparative test that is utilizing because there are a lot of comparative tests. We can compare dependent samples, and we can also compare independent samples. While in the true experimental design, in experiment, we are actually having a manipulation in the independent variables. We have randomly selected subjects for treatment and for control group. So usually the treatment group, like for example, I wanted to determine uh, the anti-cancer ability or capacity of a certain plant. So with that, um, I will do extraction, plant extraction, and my experimental group are other plant extract, getting the flavonoids. Kunyari, masyadong specific yung research mo, getting the specific component of that particular plant that has an anti-cancer activity. So after which, makuha mo na yung extract, then you will test that one to the different subjects. Usually, it can be in the animal subjects, okay? Or in the, usually pag anti-cancer, dun yan sa mga eggs, okay? Kasi nga, titingnan yung mga blood vessels niyan. And then, after which, titingnan din yung control group, which is that control group is the commercial standard, okay? Or the gold standard of care. Meaning, ano yung gold standard na we treat a certain cancer activity. So, i-compare mo yan and you will find out whether, so manipulated yung treatment group mo based on your several doses kasi you can actually compute. Okay, you have to compute kasi nga meron yan siyang tinatawag na minimum inhibitory concentration. So that's very important. Kukunin mo pa yung toxicity niyan kasi baka anti-cancer activity nga yan but that is toxic. So meron pa rin yan siyang something na kailangan siya i-tweak. Okay? And then later on, you compare whether it's effective or not to the anti-cancer activity. So by determining the certain number of blood vessels produced, so makikita mo which among these particular substances have better anti-cancer activity over the other. So that's an experimental type of research. But I'm not saying it's only laboratory, but you can also do experimental research even in education, okay? Like for example, we have control group like those in the blended approach. Meron kang certain technology that you wanted to incorporate, okay? Like itong mga kunyari in a normal classroom setting, meron kang isang section that utilizes only the traditional teaching strategy. Okay, yung classroom, lecture, but another section, you subject that one for modern teaching strategy with all the PowerPoint, so media presentation, and other instructional technology that you wanted to introduce in that particular section. Okay, and then you determine the outcome like the performance. They have the same lesson, the same test that you will conduct to them, and later on determine which is effective, those in the traditional or those sections or students subjected for instructional technology. Pero mahirap lang siya pag something like that because sometimes itong true experimental research have actually problems when it comes to validity issue. Okay, so sometimes kasi yung mga estudyante from the control group, yung traditional teaching, meron silang friends doon sa um, in an experimental group or treatment group na utilizing the instructional technology. So pwede niya makuha yung mga technology coming from other section. That is a threat to validity. It will cause contamination. And most likely, pag makuha nila yung technology or information, your results will be it will invalidate the results of your study. So these are the different approaches when it comes to quantitative research designs. Okay, next, let's proceed to the traditions in the qualitative research. These are qualitative research traditions. So in qualitative research traditions, we have ethnography. Okay, ethnography, if you want to study beliefs, culture, tradition of a particular group, okay, Like for example, you wanted to study the health-seeking behavior of a certain tribe, like the different Manobo tribe, okay, and other tribe, okay, something like that. Um, you study their culture, you study their customs, habits, okay, when it comes to health-seeking behavior. Because sometimes, di naman yan sila pumupunta sa hospital or primary health center. So, meron yan silang tinatawag na healer, okay? Something like that. So that is to study their practices, to study their traditions. That is ethnography, okay? But in ethnography, you have to immerse yourself there in the community. Hindi lang magpunta ka lang doon sa area and you are just observing them for few hours, ethnography na yan. No. When we talk about ethnography, it needs or it entails certain immersion. So it's about 6 months to 1 year immersion. You eat what they eat, you wear what they wear. Are just like part of that particular group. And then with that particular experiences immersing in that community, then you can really understand, okay, their conditions, their traditions, beliefs, practices relating to the topic that you are studying. So that is ethnography. We cannot do that because we are working, okay? Unless yung mga community extension staff natin, i-assign natin doon to be part of the community, immersing that in that community, then pwede siya mag-conduct ng ethnographic research. The next is phenomenology. Okay, this is the most common um, qualitative study, okay, conducted by a lot of researchers. So the phenomenology, it understand the experiences, okay, the everyday experiences of human beings, and later on to have a deeper insights, okay, from that lived experiences, and you can already understand those particular experiences and the meaning of that particular and the meaning of the experiences, okay, so you can interpret the participants feelings, perceptions, beliefs, okay, and to clarify, okay, the essence of the phenomenon that you wanted to investigate. So for example, I want to study about the lived experiences of teachers doing online delivery of learning during the pandemic. Okay, that's very specific. Okay, or doing the hybrid learning during the pandemic. So that is phenomenology. So you can actually determine their struggles, their the challenges that they have encountered. So during the conduct of the interview, how do they cope with the challenges? What are the lessons learned from the participants, okay, during the time that they are conducting uh, the hybrid learning? Or you can actually ask, how do their experiences shape their attitude and commitment to continue their career despite of the difficulty in conducting hybrid learning approach? So that is phenomenology, and that is actually a very good study. I have seen a lot of published research utilizing phenomenological approach. Okay, so when we talk about lived experiences and the meaning of experiences, then we call that one as phenomenology. The next is the qualitative case study. Okay, it will help you explore of a phenomenon, okay, with that particular phenomenon, okay, a unique phenomenon that are experienced by fewer individuals. Okay? So, sometimes kasi a phenomenon, okay, is not experienced by many individuals, but it can be a case only by one person or a case of only few persons. So kung merong tatlo or apat or more than one cases that you have observed based on a certain phenomenon, then we call that one as multiple case study. But kung isa lang ang merong case na ganyan, then that is a single case study. So medyo mataas itong write-ups nitong case study because each case, okay, should be properly um, extracted, okay? And at the same time also, you'll be conducting interviews, observations, and at the same time, after understanding each case, you will have a cross-case analysis kung maraming participants having that kind of case also. So you will have a cross-case analysis and that will entail a lot of writing. Okay, so in a unique phenomenon, then not true to everybody, then you can have a case study. Kasi even itong COVID, okay, hindi naman, before, previously, merong mga cases na yung wala pa ang vaccine, merong mga cases na mga tao na cannot be infected by this COVID. Okay, but there are only few of them. Although this is virulent, and at the same time can spread faster, but there are some people na hindi talaga mapasukan, and that is a case. Okay, you can investigate. Kung scientist ka talaga, then you have to look at the blood samples of that particular person and you can investigate. So bakit hindi siya mapasukan? But only few of them, so that is a case. So you can also apply that one in a qualitative research. And the last tradition, okay, of a qualitative research is the grounded theory. If you want to develop a theory, okay, it involves actually a systematic methodology. If you want to develop a theory, then you will utilize the grounded theory. Okay, so of course, you collect the data, you determine what are the existing theories, you will have an appraisal whether that certain phenomenon don't have a theory yet to explain a certain phenomenon. Okay, and you have several processes involved in the collection of data until such time that you develop a theory, and it involves inductive reasoning. Okay. So in most cases, in a qualitative research, itong phenomenology are usually used by the researcher because even if you have a work or you have studies, you can actually conduct phenomenological approach, or a case study also you can do that. Okay. In the mixed methods research design, okay, there are three core designs. Okay. The first is convergent design. So when we talk about convergent design, you combine, okay, in the phase one, you have at the same time the collection of data, both the qualitative and the quantitative data. So meaning, meron kang magkandak ka ng interview and at the same time magkandak ka ng dissemination of the questionnaire, quantitative data collection. Kasi iba yung questionnaire mo, the tool that you are utilizing, and you have also an interview coming from participants. It can be in-depth interview and focus group discussion. And after collecting the data and analyzing the data, because you analyze the quantitative data using statistics, you analyze the qualitative data using coding and thematic analysis. You merge the results, okay? And you compare the results. And you will determine whether the results are conforming, corroborating from each other, or contradicting from each other. So it depends upon the results of that study. But you converge those particular results in order to come up with a certain outcome. The data integration will give us an idea whether the results are conforming or corroborating from each other. So that is convergent design. Sabay. Sabay ang quali sa pag-conduct at saka pag-analyze. Quali and quanti sa pag-conduct and pag-analyze. The next design is exploratory sequential design. In an exploratory sequential design, it will, pag sinabing sequential, one over the other. Meaning, one method over the other. So, in an exploratory sequential, it will start first with qualitative research, conducting interview, conducting focus group discussion. Then later on, the next phase will be the quantitative phase. Okay? And then after the quantitative phase, there will be a phase 3, which is the production. Okay? The development, for example, of a tool. In fact, in a tool development, it involves exploratory sequential design. So meaning, in a tool development, mag-conduct ka muna ng interview. Like for example, exploring the dimensions of teacher self-efficacy beliefs. Okay? Sense of efficacy beliefs. Okay? Self-efficacy of teachers. Or Filipino teachers' sense of self-efficacy beliefs. Okay? So kunyari, mag-develop ka ng questionnaire na ganyan, mag-conduct ka muna ng interview. You have to conduct interview from the different educators. You have to specify who will qualify as participants of the study. And later on, the quotes or the narratives coming from the participants will be the basis in drafting your initial questions, in the initial items of your questionnaire. So after ma-develop mo yung items of the questionnaire out from the interview from the educators or teachers, you will go to the next phase, which is quantitative. Gawin mo yan siyang questionnaire tool, then disseminate to a desired sample size in many participants, many respondents. Let them answer that one. Then after answering kunyari, nakadevelop ka ng 100 items based on the interview coming from the participants, you will disseminate that 100 items to a lot of participants or a lot of respondents. And then after getting the data, you will perform statistical analysis like factor analysis to determine the dimensions of self-efficacy. So yan na yung quantitative phase. And after that, you will perform reliability, and then later on, you develop the dimensions of self-efficacy. Because there are some variables having dimensions. Although there are some variables that are unidimensional, but some are multidimensional. Like for example, the variable of burnout. Okay, when we talk about burnout, there are 3 dimensions of burnout based on the previous construct validity study, like the personal burnout, the client burnout, so burnout with clients, and the work burnout, burnout related to work. So that's the dimensions of burnout. And before determining that dimension, kailangan mo ng data gathering of many respondents, and you will perform certain analysis or statistical analysis to determine its dimension. So ito yung ginagawa sa tool development process. The items of the questionnaire is coming from the interview in the qualitative phase. Then after getting the items based from the interview, the quantitative phase, i-conduct yan siya, disseminating the questionnaire to the different participants. And after disseminating the questionnaire to the different participants, ang gagawin ng researcher is that to analyze the data using factor analysis, and later on you can see dimensions of that particular tool. And you now develop a survey tool that will measure Filipino teachers' sense of self-efficacy. So that's the exploratory sequential design. Meron din tayong explanatory sequential design. So in an explanatory sequential design, the quantitative phase is the first phase. Okay? So that would mean that you conduct the survey at first, utilizing the questionnaire, utilizing the tool. Then after conducting the survey, you determine notable areas. Kasi sometimes when we are conducting a survey utilizing the questionnaire, our discussion will focus only on the specific items of the questionnaire. You cannot go deeper. Kasi nga, if you go deeper, that is now opinion-based. So it should always be aligned to whatever items of that questionnaire. But if there are some notable areas, like there all dimensions of burnout are high, are low when it comes to personal burnout and when it comes to work burnout. But in the client burnout, the result is very high. So it will entail further explanation kasi doon naman sa client burnout, ang mga items doon, I am feeling exhausted dealing with my clients. So kunyari like something like that. So ang question yan, bakit? Bakit siya exhausted? So with that, it needs further explanation. But it cannot be explained further. It is because your tool is limited only in the items of your questionnaire. You cannot just give an opinion-based explanation bakit burnout sila with clients. So that is why you can go into the next phase, which is the qualitative phase. You select those particular responses or respondents. Few lang naman kasi nga according to Creswell, even 5 to 12 participants for a qualitative research. Hindi naman necessary you have a lot of participants. Imposible yan. Marami kang participants for a qualitative research. It will not be a qualitative research anymore. It is already a quantitative research. So in those participants in notable areas, you will conduct an interview. Why is that? You have difficulty in dealing with the client. So meaning, lalabas na lahat ng information and the qualitative results shall support and shall provide additional information to the quantitative findings. So that's the purpose of explanatory sequential design. The qualitative phase can give further explanation from the results of the quantitative phase. So that's explanatory sequential design. Okay. So where does our research question originated? Okay. Kasi they are saying that when you are conducting research, you should have curiosity. So how can we, how do we know that we have curiosity? So we have curiosity if we are asking question. Why is that happening? Why is that phenomenon occur? So that is a research question. Okay, that needs investigation. So usually research starts with a research question. Okay, so how to get these topics? Okay, kasi nga mali naman yung information that especially I'm teaching research for how many years already, and I have experienced a lot of students Sir, can you give me title of my research? I cannot give you title immediately because I will be very biased on that. That is opinion based. That is not scientific. Research that does not start with a title. Research starts with a question out from your curiosity. So where is that coming from? It can be coming from research articles and conferences. When you are reading articles, there are some things na somewhat not thoroughly explained, and there are some recommendations of that particular research which will become an origin of that research question of yours. There are things that you can observe that there is a significant relationship, and you want further explanation why there is a relationship in that particular variable. So based on that critical thinking, it will lead you to another idea of conducting another research. Okay, and then um, conferences in research conferences, usually there are presentations uh, when it comes to um, the findings of the study. And with that particular findings, you can observe limitations of the study in which it can be a start for you to develop, to out from curiosity, to have a question, and that can be answered through another investigation, another research. Another thing is critical thinking about practices and problems. Even in our classroom, we can actually observe problems among students in all sections that um, we are handling, and those particular problems that we have encountered made us think, why is that these particular students are not good in the computation or doing the mathematical equation computation in all of my section. Okay, and you have observed that these students are actually came from a 2-year pandemic situation in which they are having online learning. So in that particular case, you can observe certain problems. They cannot perform this actual and practical computation, and that made you think to conduct a study. So uh, another discussion with your colleagues, discussion with your co-teachers, with your co-researchers. That discussion may lead you to a research question, applying new concepts or methods to old issues, lalo na itong mga IT and engineers, okay? Sometimes they will develop certain designs, and that particular design may lead to a better outcome as compared to the previous standard. Itong IT can develop a software, they can develop a certain um, system that can help the processes as compared to the previous processes. So that is that can be done also, or that can be a basis also. What if? It's more on what if I will make this system online rather than it is local area only in our institution? What if I will make this an app? Our enrollment system is in a form of an app, or the payment transactions of the students will be in the app applications in Google Play. So with that, they can just easily pay their accounts using that particular app, utilizing the GCash or some other payment apps. Okay, so with that, that new idea can be utilized to form a system to conduct a research. And the top 10 issues related to your discipline. So usually, itong mga top 10 issues related in your discipline, this is coming from, okay? This is coming from the research agenda of the institution. Because the research agenda of the institution are aligned to the National Higher Education Research Agenda, the National Unified Health Research Agenda, and some other research agenda in the Philippines, particularly in the research agencies of the Philippines. So these are identified as priority areas because these are the problematic situation in your discipline. Okay? So again, research starts with a question. Always remember that. Do not start research with a title because you will be biased. It can be trial and error. Okay. So after, for example, critical thinking, after discussion with your colleagues, after applying new concepts or identifying new concepts, go to the literature. Read the literature. What are previously done in the literature? Do not go directly in the title because you have to conceptualize a topic. You have to justify the topic. Baka meron ng gumawa ng ganyan. So why do you want to do it again? There's no more novelty of your research. Your research is not anymore unique. So whatever that you have come up, the questions that you have come up, the next phase will be review of related literature. Do not consider review of related literature as just merely part of a research format. Because sometimes the RRL are the copy-pasted component of the paper, which is wrong because the RRL will give us an idea on the inventory of researches and findings on what are previously done in the body of knowledge. While understanding in the critical review of the related literature, we can understand what are previously done and what are not yet done. So kung hindi mo binasa yan, you will not know what's happening in the scientific world. And that's the very important element. Read the literature. Nowadays it's not anymore difficult to understand what have been previously done because we have a lot of database already when it comes to publications. There are free publications right now, there are paid publications, and there are some publications that are open source, okay, in which we can have a direct access of that particular publication. So we consider that one as a very important part of the paper. Kaya nga kung magbasa ako ng paper, although this is thesis format, ang sa atin kasi we don't have a portion of review of related literature because the literature in our format is distributed all throughout. In fact, the introduction is a review of related literature. Now, mabasa ko sa mga estudyante, even mga master's and doctorate degree, they are copy-pasting literature. In fact, may matira pa nga doon na click here. Meron pa mga hyperlink. And there are some other hints that this is a copy-pasted material. So we have to avoid that one. Even to our students, if you want your students um, to learn about scholarly writing, when you say research in the library, search about this particular topic, let them do the referencing, let them do the paraphrasing, what have they understand, and let them do a what we call a synthesis of the literature. Pero kung ang purpose mo lang definition of terms, like what is the description of that, do not anymore do that as an assignment. You can see that one in Google. But if you want them to learn, they need to have a critical review on your topic that you want them to understand. Let them do a synthesis and let them paraphrase whatever information from the literature, and they can do a referencing style. So something that they can learn, that when they are in the college, they will have their thesis, they can utilize that skills and attitude in utilizing the literature rather than doing the copy paste. Tapos sometimes bigyan lang tayo ng magandang colorful outputs, yung mga facade in the front page na merong mga designs and something like that, we always appreciate that as a hard work. But if you have to consider the hard work is in the content of the paper. It's not the design, because we are not, especially if your subject is not art and design. So you have to put more focus on the critical appraisal of the resources that you wanted them to explore. Okay, so what are the criteria for a good research topic? Okay, or question. So these are the 5 criteria. We call this one as um, finer. Okay, okay, we call this one as finer. We have the research must be feasible. The research must be interesting. Your research must be novel, ethical, and relevant. So when you talk about feasibility of research, remember that sometimes we overdo our topic, and sometimes we have not forecasted on what are the issues that we may encounter in the future when conducting that kind of research. You have to understand the feasibility of your research when it comes to the number of respondents. Example, that is just one area of feasibility, because especially in performing quantitative research, you have to attain the required sample size, especially that you have a lot of variables, a lot of parameters, and with this number of variables, you might have a difficulty in attaining the number of respondents or the number of subjects to be included in the study. So for example, based on your computation of the sample size, you need a total of 300 respondents in your study. So that's quite a huge number. Okay, if you cannot attain that kind of 300 respondents, then you will have a problem. You cannot continue with the research, or you cannot proceed to the writing of the outputs of your study, because you have not yet reached the desired number of participants. Especially that there are some cases that your participants are very difficult to find. Okay, like for example, if you are studying about people living with HIV, so that would mean that you cannot just ask somebody, do you have HIV? Okay, so you need to have referrals coming from agencies, from city health office. So it's very difficult to to gather data immediately without referral, because that is a unique participant. Okay, so that is why the feasibility when it comes to participants and the sample size should be considered when you are conducting a study. Feasibility also when it comes to the scope of your study. Remember that when you are conducting a data gathering, if you will say that your scope is in region 11, okay, it will entail time, it will entail cost, okay? It is because the larger the scope, the more number of participants, the anong tawag dyan, at the same time also, it will entail a lot of transportation to get the responses coming from the representatives of each provinces in the region if your study is in the regional level. So that is why you have to determine the limitation of your study when it comes to scope. so that you will not have difficulty when it comes to the data gathering aspect. Okay? So, um, yan, the affordability when it comes to the time and money. Okay, that's also very important as one of the feasibility. Availability of technical expertise. Especially, for example, you wanted to conduct a study that will ensure that will utilize higher form of statistics. If there's no available statistician in the institution or even statistician in some other in the region, then you will have a problem. Okay? So pupunta ka pa doon in some other region to find the statistician that can help you analyze your data. So that can be uh, a feasibility when it comes to technical expertise. In some cases, in experimental research, if there is no technology in our locality or in the region that can analyze the samples, sometimes they are sending the samples in Manila, sending the samples in other countries like Korea, Singapore, in order that your samples will be analyzed. So you have to look into that because you might have a problem on feasibility if there's no technology available in our locality, in our institution, or a nearby institution. So that should be attained as one of the very important aspect of a good research. Next is your study must be interesting. Okay, so there are some studies already that are commonly conducted. In fact, when you look into the literature, a lot of studies already has been conducted, investigated on the variables that are included in your study. Like for example, if you want to study, if your study is all about, ito makikita ko ito always like teaching styles and academic performance. So from 1920s, 1930s, 1950, 1990, you can see a lot of studies already that there is a strong and positive relationship between teaching styles and academic performance. So your study is not anymore interesting, meaning, why do you want to do it again? What makes this study interesting that in the literature, the results are the same for how many generations, it doesn't change already. So that's not anymore an interesting topic. So to make your study interesting, you have to look into the priority areas or problems or issues encountered related to your discipline in the Philippines. Okay? So sometimes mga unique phenomenon like pandemic. Okay, ngayon ang daming mga publications about because of that COVID-19, and this particular publication, kasi wala pa masyadong literature on that, will make it really an interesting topic. It is because that particular survey is conducted during the time of pandemic situation. So that priority or issues or agenda will be your basis to have a very good and interesting topic. So another is your study must be novel. Okay? The novelty of the study is based on how your study can contribute to the body of knowledge. Meaning, can it refute or provide additional finding? Sometimes you can contradict previous findings. That if your study findings contradict the theory, then contradict the theory. Because I have seen a lot of researcher that the findings are in contrast with the theory and the previous finding. Hindi niya i-report kasi maghanap siya ng mga supporting literature that should supposedly conforming to his or her findings. So do not do that. if that is not in conformance to the previous finding, and you are sure about your methodology, then contradict the theory and determine whether what are the areas, okay? Because theories has also limitations and weaknesses and why that particular finding happened. So you can provide additional explanation that can be useful, especially in your recommendation for future study. That is why theories are tested across time. It doesn't really mean that your study always conform to the theory. Although quantitative research is theory testing, we wanted to determine whether that particular theory is still applicable. So that is why we are conducting research. Do not criticize research if you don't have research conducted on that particular topic, because there are some um, individuals who are always criticizing but there's no research output. If you want to criticize the research, conduct a research, and that's happening in the scientific world. Even in the time of Aristotle and Galileo, when Aristotle said that the heavier the object, the faster it would fall. Okay? So, anong ginawa ni Galileo? He made an experiment. Okay? And that experiment, free-falling heavier object, heavier stone, and smaller stone, demonstrating that one to the public and releasing the stones, big stones and small stone at the same time. And those object falls at the same speed and at the same time. But according to Galileo, Aristotle is not wrong. But Aristotle did not saw certain component, which is the air friction, and that particular air friction affects the free falling objects. So we are actually what we called as, we are improving, expanding the theory. It doesn't really mean it contradict. You might contribute for the expansion of that particular theory. Kasi sometimes if that is in contrast, sometimes you will find ways na makahanap ng supporting literature. But you can use that results as a way for you to improve further the theory to where you anchored your study. Kasi when Galileo died, Newton was born. And Newton actually improved further the laws of motion of Galileo. The theory of Galileo, and develop his law of motion, the the law of acceleration, the law of interaction. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So you can see that theories are actually tested across time, improved in time, and developed until such time that it will become a universal law. Okay, so that's novelty in research. That is why hindi ka pwede magbangga-bangga lang ng variables. It is because especially in a correlational type of research, it is because the the theory may not be, there's no theory to explain that kind of relationship. Okay? There's no theory to support the relationship of your variables. That is why it's not good to start with title, kasi para ka lang nag-trial and error with the variables. And that is not a good practice in research. The next is ethical. Your research must be ethical. So alam naman natin ang concept ng ethics is that the benefit should outweigh the risk. Okay? So the benefit should outweigh the risk, meaning you have to protect the subjects. Okay? That is why we have certain guidelines when it comes to informed consent. Pag below 18 years old, there should be an informed consent. Okay? And at the same time, also assent. Okay? Kung hindi papayag yung what we call as participant, then you cannot actually coerce that participant to be part of your study. In fact, even if hindi siya nagbigay ng consent. I mean, nagbigay siya ng consent. And later on, he realized that he don't want to be part of your study. Then, he or she always have the right to withdraw. Okay? So kung gusto niya mag-withdraw in the study, then you cannot do anything about it because that is the right of the participant. Okay? So we sometimes consider participants as just merely subjects. But right now, participants are actually part of the research in which they are respected and in which they are protected, and you are accountable to whatever that will harm the participants. Kasi pwede mo sabihin that our research are survey questionnaire type. Will that cause harm? Yes, it may cause harm. Okay? That sometimes, what if I'm just conducting an interview? Will just cause harm? Will that cause harm? Yes. Your questions may be somewhat invasive to the mental and psychological health of that particular person. Okay? So, another thing is that, what if my questions do not cause harm? Okay, for example, you will be conducting what we call as an interview with your students, okay, on the parental involvement of students on those who are utilizing the online learning. Kasi we are doing the hybrid. So your participants are the parents of that student. So for example, the parent is a tricycle driver. How much is lost in a 30-minute interview just to get the data from that parent, okay, when during the time that he is answering your questions, okay? So that is very unethical. For example, your interview is about 30 minutes. How much is lost within 30 minutes financially and economically to the family, okay, while you are doing your survey? So that's unethical. That is financial and economic loss to the family. So that is why what you are going to do is to make it ethical. So to make it ethical, you can say, how much can you earn within 30 minutes driving? So pwede niya sabihin, I can earn a net income of 50 pesos in a 30-minute driving. Can I pay you 50 pesos and let's have an interview? That is ethical. Okay? So the benefit outweigh the risk. Okay, that's the concept. We outweigh the risk to make our study ethical. Okay? So that is just an example, but always remember our participants, especially if human subjects, needs to be protected because they are part of our study and you cannot finish your study without the presence of your participants. Okay? Although I think you have separate discussion about ethics, but at least I'm giving you an idea and as an example on how important is research ethics in conducting a study. Even the confidentiality, even the anonymity, even the school that you are studying, do not name the school. Kasi there are some questionnaire, I can see, lagyan pa ng name, tapos optional. Do not anymore write the name. Kasi you have to establish data privacy, you have to establish the confidentiality, the anonymity of the participants. Why do you want to place a name in the questionnaire if that is optional? Do not anymore write that one because you are protecting the participants of your study. Tapos ma-expose yan siya. Tapos pag ma-expose siya, you are conducting a research of job satisfaction of employees. Tapos may pangalan doon. Tapos ang rating niya is 11111 sa kanyang satisfaction. So, do not do that because it will expose the person who rated. Okay? Especially kung ang i-rate niya ang kanyang administrator, ang leader, or something like that. You have to ensure anonymity and confidentiality of the participants of the study. And then your study must be relevant. Okay? So the relevance of the study is that your study must can be used for decision making, okay, as an intervention or as an enhancement of a certain policy or a program. We are not only conducting research for the purpose only that um, we are contributing to the body of knowledge. We are conducting research because we wanted to solve problem in the community. So in order to solve problem among the beneficiaries or the institution, okay, that you are studying, that the results of the study must be used by the administrators to utilize the study for policy making. Like for example, the study that we had in FGD, it reached the management committee that the students have difficulty when it comes to the technology. So that is why we purchased the learning management system and some other technology that we are utilizing right now. It is because that is uh, the action based from the results of that particular study conducted among the challenges of students when it comes to the online learning. So hindi ibig sabihin that we are only contributing to the body of knowledge. Your research must be utilized to alleviate the problem, to form a solution in a form of policy. Kunyari, nag-conduct tayo ng research about burnout of employees. So we will submit that one to the HRD. And for example, there is a physical burnout, then the HRD might consider other arrangement like flexible work arrangement or some other recreational activities like Zumba and some other sports or physical activities that can lower down the physical burnout of the faculty and staff. So that is what I mean. When we talk about relevance, it should be something that can be utilized for policy making, for enhancement program, for intervention program to address the issue or the problem. An introduction is a story. It's a justification on why we wanted to conduct this particular research. What's the novelty of your study and what's the relevance of your study? From the introduction alone, we can determine whether your study is a relevant study or not. In fact, if you want to publish in a high impact journal, an international journal, you have to frame your introduction properly in a way that it will give a very good story and justification why there's a need to conduct that kind of research. Pag maganda yung introduction mo, it will really get the attention of the readers and at the same time also the researchers, the scientists. Kung funding agency yan siya, the funding agency will actually um, give their budget or give their money in order to fund your research because they like your study, the direction of your study, because introduction also gives the direction or what are the expected outcomes of your study. So introduction, as what I have mentioned, is a story, but this is not opinion based. Introduction is scientific based. So meaning your introduction is also considered as a review of related literature. It will be based from the previously or recently uh, updated or at the same time recent literatures that are published. Okay, but not necessarily na hindi natin i-consider yung non-recent literature. But when we talk about problem situation, of course, this should be recent problems experienced by the society in relation to your problem. So the introduction has four basic components. We have the problem situation. It will expose the problem or the outcome variable, the problem about your outcome variable. The outcome variable, we call that one as the dependent variable. If that is qualitative research, then we are looking into the phenomenon. So the problem situation exposed, okay, certain problem that you wanted to study, okay? And that particular exposure should really highlight the extent of the problem. It's not just saying that there is a problem about turnover of faculty. So what is the extent of the problem? So how do you expose that there is really a big problem about turnover of faculty? So you have to emphasize that one in the introduction. And it will form a statement. We call that one as problem statement. Okay? And then um, that number two, these are the interplay between the variables. If you are doing a correlational research, or if you are doing an interventional research, what are the different interventions done in order to solve the problem? Kasi when you make a story, after emphasizing the problem, the next part will be what are the things that has been done previously or before when it comes to the addressing the problem. So meaning, you need to have an inventory of studies. Hindi pwede na hindi mo alam kung ano yung nagawa na in the literature, what are previously done. So you have to have a lot of readings. You have to conduct inventory of what are the previously done studies in addressing the problem. If the problem is all about turnover of faculty, what are the previously done studies to explain about the antecedents of turnover of faculty or faculty turnover? What are the interventions made in order to address that kind of problem? So meaning, the number two aspect, you have to conduct a review of related literature. Problem situation is also a literature. As what I have mentioned, what's the extent of the problem? So how many percentage when it comes to faculty turnover? So you have to emphasize that one based on the previous studies. So as what I have mentioned, post-studies ito lahat. But you have to form a statement to make a story. And then, the research gap. The research gap, one of the criteria of a good research is that the research must be novel. So the research gap should be something that uh, establish the novelty of your study. What makes your study unique? What makes your study different as compared to the previous studies? So you have to justify that your study can provide additional information. You should have a knowledge claim. Okay? You should have to knowledge claim. You have to you might contradict previous studies, you might criticize previous studies, and that particular thesis statement of yours will actually give an idea among the readers that you have a, a great justification that this study can provide new knowledge in the literature. And then the last component of your introduction is the relevance of your study. When we talk about relevance, we call this one a social value. It doesn't really mean that the study is only for knowledge generation, but a study must be something that will ensure, okay, that your study can be utilized to have a contribution to the society, and that your study can be utilized for policy making, for intervention program to improve the quality of life of the beneficiaries of your study. So that's relevance, meaning not only for the body of knowledge, but also to help solve the problem, to form a solution, to minimize the problem, and to improve the quality of life. That's the purpose of conducting a research. So how do we frame the introduction utilizing these four important components? I'll give an example. Makita, Ma'am Jean?
Yes po, Doc.
Okay, this example is the title is Burnout and Self-Awareness as Predictors of Psychological Well-Being of Teachers During the Pandemic. Okay, so we have to determine first the variables of the study. The dependent variable, which is the problem or issue under study, that's the dependent variable. We call that one as outcome variable. It's the psychological well-being. The independent variables are burnout, and we have also the self-awareness. So we have two independent variables and one dependent variable, which is the psychological well-being. So if psychological well-being is the dependent variable, you focus the problem situation on psychological well-being, because the problem or issue under study is the dependent variable. So what you are going to do next is to conduct literature review. Okay? Inventory of studies about the problem on psychological well-being. So, for example, I have conducted a literature review. Pwede kong gawin in the table muna. Hindi muna ako gagawa ng paragraph. So, I can just make it in a form of a table para at least meron akong inventory. So, according to research conducted by Holtzman, okay, you have to cite the author and the year. The psychological well-being of 73% of educators working in schools located in Southern California has declined in recent years. As a result, each and every educator who took part in the research reported feeling worried and concerned for their students. So meaning, there are facts and figures, statistics to show the extent of the problem. So meaning 73%, this is a statistics that is quite huge enough to show that there's a problem about psychological well-being. Another thing is that merong studies conducted, okay? So you can have the traditional way of emphasizing the problem. You can have global, national, or local. So another problem about psychological well-being based on literature review, the findings show that 27.3% of 17,000 people surveyed in a sample of educators from University of Manchester. Kanina is California from one country, ngayon from London. So if you want to establish the traditional way like global, you have to ensure that there is a representation from developed, developing, and underdeveloped countries. Hindi pwede that you are just emphasizing one country, global problem na yan. No. If you want to really establish that that is a global problem, then there should be a representation on the different countries in order to really say that this is a common problem worldwide. So there should be findings, there should be percentages or statistics that will show the extent of the problem. So just like this in the University of London, there is a mental distress. So that is related to psychological well-being, and the educators experience anxiety and depression. These are common, and stress, self-reported stress, which are common psychological reactions to the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay? So, another, meron na namang study conducted uh, in the Asian Journal of Psychiatry, that the study found that, okay, so another country na naman ito with the symptoms of anxiety and depression from the Asian Journal of Psychiatry showing problems on the psychological well-being of educators. So meaning, meron ng systematic review kasi ito. So there are a lot of countries involved in this Asian journal kasi when you talk about systematic review, it involves a lot of studies in a particular locality. So the next is you can also look into the Philippine problem about psychological well-being. According to the findings of Montano and Aceves, the pandemic stress has debilitating effects on the mental health of Filipino teacher samples. Of this, 40.7% experience moderate to severe stress. Okay, so makikita nyo, there are really statistics to show that there is a problem. You cannot only say that there is a problem about psychological well-being. It's not a good justification. You have to specify ano yung problema. If there is a statistics to show, that would mean that there is really a problem, not only global but also in our national scenario. Kung meron kayong local or regional scenario, then expose that one in the problem situation. Okay? So this is an inventory. Wala pa ito nakaparagraph na in a form of a story. I'm just making an inventory that you can actually do in order that it can help you frame the writing of your introduction. And then you proceed to the factors influencing the problem, okay, or the outcome. So when you are conducting a literature review, you have found, for example, two factors. Meron dalawang factors na you have found which are burnout and self-awareness. Sabi ng author, burnout is believed to have a strong and negative correlation with psychological health. Okay? Thus, the rise in employee burnout would undoubtedly decrease their psychological well-being. So this is an investigation on what particular factors that can influence the outcome, which is the psychological well-being. Another study revealed that burnout, okay, so dapat ito, burnout, okay, is, okay, reported that burnout, so dito dapat, burnout is a strong predictor of psychological well-being. So, these are evidences. Kung gusto niyo dagdagan pa, then place all the findings on what are the factors that can influence the burnout. Then, self-awareness, this is another variable, independent variable, provides positive influence on psychological well-being. As a matter of fact, better self-awareness improves the psychological well-being of teachers. You cite the author, another study about the relationship between self-awareness and psychological well-being. So meaning you have already conducted a literature review that these two variables, burnout and self-awareness, are important predictors of psychological well-being. Then another, we have the research gap. Okay, so there are many ways to establish the gap of the study. It can be variable gap, like based on the inventory, kasi makatulong yung factors influencing the problem because that's an inventory of study conducted already to explain psychological well-being. So you can justify that most of the studies conducted are bivariate association between burnout and psychological well-being. Paisa-isa lang ang study, burnout and psychological well-being, and another study, self-awareness and psychological well-being. Okay? So you can justify here that in the next column, what are the areas that has not been answered by previous study? So the areas, you can just write here, combined influence of burnout and self-awareness on psychological well-being is not yet explored. Meaning, um, hindi ka pa nakakita ng study na sinabay yung dalawa as predictors, burnout and and self-awareness. Because in the previous study, only between burnout and psychological well-being and self-awareness and psychological well-being. So less has been done that these two variables, burnout and self-awareness, are combined as independent variables to predict the outcome, which is the psychological well-being. So this is a good justification. Okay. Another thing is that group gap. Okay. So meaning when talk about group gap, these are what particular group that are being studied previously. Previous studies are focused on other group of professionals such as in health workers and industries. Okay? So meaning, ang previous study, when you talk about psychological well-being, are focused on other professionals. Okay? Focus on other group but not yet investigated among teachers as sample. This is just an example. I'm not saying wala pa ito. But this is just an example of justification when we talk about research gap. So meaning, when we talk about research gap, it will entail a knowledge claim which leads you to conduct a study to determine which among these independent variables or factors best predict psychological well-being. Kasi in the previous study, predictors naman talaga sila. They are associated. However, you wanted to know which among these predictors or factors best influence the psychological well-being in a sample of teachers. Because in the previous studies, most of the studies conducted about psychological well-being are focused on health workers and those working in the industries. Okay? So that's a justification. And of course, in the relevance of the study, ikaw na ang gagawa. Wala nang anong tawag diyan. There's no more literature because in the relevance of the study, you are the one who will establish the significance of your study. So after providing all the inventory, okay, after making the inventory, you can now write the introduction. Okay, like in the problem situation, psychological well-being of teachers has been disturbed considerably as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, this is a statement. That is my statement. But as what I have mentioned, do not make a statement that is opinion-based. So when I make that statement, that is just a way for me to form a story. So I'm saying that psychological well-being has been disturbed, okay, because of COVID-19. The remaining statements should be a literature, okay, but paraphrase it to connect with the previous statement. Hindi pwede i-copy-paste kasi kung hindi mo i-copy-paste mo yan, hindi yan siya mag-connect or it will not organize the paragraph or the sentences. And with that, i-insert mo na yung mga different findings. Okay? As a matter of however, many teachers, okay, are not engaged in constant change and crisis management, caught unprepared during the pandemic, which resulted to poor health outcomes. So this is another statement of mine, but supported with another literature. As a matter of fact, the study of Holtzman have shown a decrease in psychological well-being of 73% of teachers working in Southern California schools. So you can see that um, the paragraphs and the statements are formed in order to form a story. This is a problem situation. This is in a global problem perspective, okay? And this is the one that has been part of the inventory. Ito mga 73%. So these are showing certain poor health outcomes like decrease in psychological well-being. So pwede nyo na i-connect yung another study. Moreover, the study of peers. So kailangan mo ng mga transition statements like connectives like moreover, meanwhile, furthermore, on the other hand. So, yan. That will connect one paragraph to another. Okay? So, the study of peers, ito na yung another inventory kanina. You have to make a story. Ano yung nangyari sa results na yan? And in similar vein, as reported in the systematic review published in Asian Journal of Psychiatry, revealed that the pandemic have impacted the psychological well-being of educators. So meaning, these are situations in other countries when it comes to psychological well-being. Then in this is the Philippine setting sa baba. Meanwhile, the department or in the same way, so pwede din yan. So you connect paragraphs. And what are the percentage statistics to show the problem in the Philippines? So place that one in the first part of introduction. Another is factors influencing the dependent variable. So kanina na find out natin na burnout and self-awareness. So we will make a paragraph of that. Several studies highlighted personal factors as important antecedents of psychological well-being, such as burnout and self-awareness. You cite the author. Burnout is considered to have a strong and inverse relationship with psychological well-being, while self-awareness provide positive influence on psychological well-being. So you can add additional information about its relationship. It's up to you. There's no problem with that. Di naman pataasan talaga ang introduction for as long as the components are there. And then after that, the research gap. However, this is now a certain justification on the need to conduct the study. However, most of the studies are focused on its bivariate association of burnout and psychological well-being, cite the author, and self-awareness and psychological well-being, cite the author. Hence, a dearth of investigation of the combined influence of these factors on psychological well-being. Furthermore, the previous studies are focused on other group of professionals such as health workers and those working in industries. Thus, less has been done among academic professionals such as teachers. Okay, so this is a justification on the uniqueness of your study. And that, the relevance of the study shall provide important information that can be used by school leaders. So wala nang author sa relevance of the study to develop programs that will decrease the stress and anxiety and can improve the mental health status of teachers. Moreover, the result of the study can be used by teachers to have personal intervention, particularly in notable areas that can be addressed in their personal level. So this is the social value of the study, and that will really help a lot, like development of programs and at the same time personal intervention. So that forms the introduction. You don't need to place relevance of the study. You don't need to place research gap. I'm just placing it para merong guide na these are the different components of the introduction. So problem situation, factors influencing the dependent variable, research gap. Pwede ito mga interventions done. So pwede mo isulat din dyan. And then the relevance of the study. So this is how to make the introduction and the four components of the introduction. We will give you a copy on this so that you will have a guide in writing the introduction. And this will really help you a lot, especially that, as what I have mentioned, the introduction is the very important part of the paper because it can justify your study, and the direction of the study is actually being um, explained in your introduction. So pwede naman sa research gap, after research gap, pwede mo na ilagay dito yung um, direction of your study, and you can actually write already the hypothesis. Okay? Like, furthermore, okay, in addition, with this, or like with this, the study, will provide an explanation on which factors best predict the psychological well-being of teachers in higher education institution. So something like that, it will already give an idea on the direction of the study, and that will comprise the introduction. Next aspect in the proposal is the objectives. Okay. So objectives are sometimes written in declarative statement or interrogative statement. So objective can be descriptive in nature or inferential in nature. When we talk about descriptive, it's more on um, asking question about the current status or the characteristic of a specific variable. And when we talk about inferential, this will be a question for hypothesis testing that links the different variables of the study. So I'll give you an example of a descriptive and inferential question utilizing the same example that we have. Okay. Then, yeah, okay. So our independent variables in the example are the burnout and self-awareness. So burnout is the first independent variable and self-awareness is the second independent variable. The outcome variable or the dependent variable is the psychological well-being. So to provide objectives, we can have it in a form of research questions, or sometimes it is called a statement of the problem. So you don't have to worry, whatever terminology that you will place here will just be acceptable. So you have to make a general statement uh, about the main direction of the study. So this study will determine the influence of burnout and self-awareness on the psychological well-being of teachers. More specifically, it will answer the following questions. So anything that starts with what? Number one, you ask first for the first independent variable, what is the degree of burnout? Or you can place what is the level of burnout of teachers in terms of. So it can be a term like level, extent, status, degree. Okay, so we can utilize those particular words. And then that is for the first independent variable. While these indicators 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, like personal burnout, work burnout, client burnout, these are the dimensions of burnout. So where can we find this one? You have to place the indicators based on the questionnaire that you are utilizing, the adapted questionnaire. Do not make your own indicator. So if the questionnaires contain subscales of burnout, like personal burnout, I feel physically exhausted, so something like that. So if there are items there for personal burnout, categorized. So usually kasi ang questionnaire, they are categorized, or there are TOS to determine the items 1, 2, 5, 9 is for personal burnout, items 3, 7, 8, 11 for work burnout. So something like that. There are questionnaires that are really multidimensional. So you have to specify it in the statement of the problem. So as to how many categories or indicators, it will depend upon the questionnaire that you will be using. Again, you have to adapt a questionnaire that is valid and reliable. Do not make your own questionnaire because that is not scientific. So you have to adapt that one, especially in a Likert scale questionnaire. Number two, okay lang kung profile kasi you can determine what is the demographic profile, age, gender, educational attainment. Okay lang yan. But if that is a Likert scale, like strongly agree, agree, disagree. So you don't make your own item question. Don't make your own item question. You have to adapt it because it's non-scientific if you will make a self-made questionnaire. you can follow the process. Kung wala talagang questionnaire available, then you have to develop a tool that is really utilizing that you will utilize the process of validity and reliability. So mataas din ang process in tool development in the absence of the tool. But nowadays, there are a lot of variables that have been used. There are a lot of tools already available. That is for gathering the data. For experimental research, like in the laboratory, of course, you use a certain tool like the triple beam balance, the flask, the graduated cylinder. So ito yung ginagamit natin na instrument in order to gather data like the spectrophotometer. So kung higher experimental studies, so PCR tests. So these are instruments used in the laboratory to gather data. Pero kung survey type ka, you have to have a questionnaire which is valid and reliable. Kasi for uh, example is that if you want to measure the height of a person, of course there are a lot of tools available to measure height, but there is an appropriate tool. So kung bibigyan ka ng ruler at saka bibigyan ka ng tape measure, mas maganda gamitin mo is tape measure. Although ruler can measure the height, pero it might have certain it will have a problem on the precision. Unlike in the tape measure kasi mataas siya, so you can measure directly the height of the person. So that's what I'm saying. So the tool must be valid. It should follow standardization process for validity and reliability. The next question here is on the second independent variable, what is the level of self-awareness among teachers in terms of reflection, rumination? So these are the dimensions of self-awareness. And saan galing itong reflection and rumination? Galing yan siya sa questionnaire. So that would mean that hindi dapat na something na kayo maglagay ng different questionnaire. You will get the questionnaire, I mean the indicators coming from the tool that you will be utilizing. For example, this is the tool burnout inventory. Okay, so I have read the validity and reliability study of this burnout inventory. And with this burnout inventory, it has dimensions like personal burnout. These are the items of personal burnout. How often do you feel tired? How often are you physically exhausted? So until the last item. So there are what they called as Likert scale, always, often, sometimes, seldom, never. So ito yung mga response categories. Another dimension niya is work-related burnout. There are item questions and client-related burnout. These are the item questions. So that is what I mean when I say that the dimensions of the questionnaire should be based, or the indicators should be based from the tool that you will be utilizing. So the next question, kasi tatlong variable, the last descriptive question is focused on the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the psychological well-being of teachers. And you can ask what is the level of psychological well-being of teachers in terms of, so wala pa akong nakitang questionnaire, but of course, um, this particular psychological well-being is multidimensional. So my indicators will depend upon the tool that I am utilizing. So kung meron siyang tatlong indicators, then I will place the 3 indicators here. So kung wala siyang dimensions, because there are some questionnaires that do not have dimension. So you can go directly, what is the level of psychological well-being of teachers? Question mark. So you don't need to place in terms of 3.1, 3.2. You don't need to do that if the questionnaire do not have any dimension. Okay? So these number 1, 2, 3 questions, these are descriptive question. Anything that starts with what is a descriptive question. Dali lang. Okay, so the next, after you have already placed a descriptive question for each of the variable, you can proceed to inferential questions. Okay, so inferential question is a question whether you wanted to correlate or you wanted to compare, okay, based on what is the intention of your study. So the direction of this study is to determine the influence. So you are correlating here. So the inferential question would need a hypothesis, okay? It will link variables and it will determine whether this particular question, you will test this particular question utilizing the hypothesis that you will use per as aligned to the research question. So for example, number 4, so we have HO1, we can just have this kind of hypothesis. There is no significant relationship. This is a null hypothesis between, okay, so pwede mo isa-isahin, 1.1, burnout and psychological well-being. So in a descriptive question, you don't need to have a hypothesis. Only for inferential question. You will know that's inferential if meron ka na makitang term na significant. Okay? There is no significant relationship. We will test that kind of hypothesis uh, after gathering the data. Okay. There's no question. Okay. And HO2 is burnout and self-awareness do not significantly predict, okay, significantly predict the psychological. Okay, so that's the hypothesis 2 for number 4 and the number 5 question. So this is correlation. Number 4 is correlation, but correlation does not mean causation, that one factor is a predictor to the other. So you have to go higher with the statistics, and this is number 5, which is a regression question in which it will determine whether these two variables predict the outcome, which is the psychological well-being. So this is the way to draft the statement of the problem or the objectives of the study. And of course, this should be measurable. Each of these questions should be having statistics. Okay, so it depends upon the nature of the data and the assumption of the test before you can determine what's the appropriate statistics of choice. Okay, but of course, since this is Likert, we can utilize the number 1 and number 2 to 3, the mean and the standard deviation, and number 4 and number 5. If these are all Likert scale per variable, then we can utilize the Pearson R, and number 5 will be the multiple regression analysis. So meaning, as what I'm trying to emphasize, that each questions here should be measurable. There should be statistics, there should be questionnaire available so that we can do data analysis. Okay, so that's for research objectives. In fact, the tables will depend upon your objectives as to how many objectives of your study. Theoretical framework, this is a theory, okay, a literature. A theory is an old literature that can explain the relationship between the variables of your study. So that would mean that you cannot just simply link variables without any theoretical foundation. Okay, so if a person, for example, if there is a theory that says that If a person is, okay, usually there's a name of a theory. If, kunyari, wellness theory by OSPO, I don't know the year, I forgot the year, that if a person experience physical and psychological exhaustion, most likely that person will have a poor mental and psychological health. Okay, so if that is the statement, so meaning physical and psychological exhaustion, that is burnout. Okay, or if a person experience prolonged stress, that is a burnout. Okay, prolonged stress is burnout. Most likely that person will have poor mental and psychological health. So that is talking about psychological well-being. So it doesn't really mean that the theory will really say about the term of your variable, but it can be vague, but it is a statement that can be your basis that your two variables or another relationship in your model have actually linked with it, that they are actually linked with each other. So ganyan ang theory. It's not theory of burnout, theory of hindi yung paisa-isa. The theory must explain relationship kasi that's the intention of your study. It's not theory of burnout, theory of self-awareness, theory of psychological well-being, but the theory must explain that burnout is associated with well-being, that self-awareness is associated with well-being. So you can have two or more theories for as long as this theory or theories can explain how the independent variables are associated with the dependent variable. So I'll give an example. So for example, a theory of plant behavior by Azen in 1991. Okay, according to that theory, it says that a certain behavior can occur if a person have the intention to perform the behavior. The stronger the intention, the more likely that the behavior will occur. So when you read theory, you have to understand what are the variables involved and what is that particular phenomenon. Then, according to him, intention is in turn influenced by different factors such as attitude, subjective norm. Subjective norm is social pressure, okay? And perceived behavioral control, the ability of a person to perform the behavior, that is perceived behavioral control. And among these factors, it is only the perceived behavioral control can most likely have a direct effect on the behavior. So, in theory of planned behavior, it will really explain how certain behavior can occur. So the theory is our basis of our relationship model. Okay? So hindi ito na ang theory natin is somewhat only for the purpose na anong tawag dyan, na meron tayong malagay. But the theory will actually be our basis on what particular model that we will be utilizing or we will be illustrating. So the model can be anong tawag diyan? The conceptual framework, that is the conceptual framework of the study. So if I will utilize that particular theory, so according to um, a certain behavior, kunyari, buying behavior, okay? Kunyari, bibili ako ng iPhone. According to Eisen, before a behavior can occur, okay, a person must have an intention to perform the behavior. So before I will buy an iPhone, according to that theory, I should have an intention to buy. Okay? So we will follow what the theory is all about. Okay? So meaning intention is a precursor of the behavior. So before ako bibili ng iPhone, meron muna dapat akong intention. And the stronger the intention, the more likely that the behavior will occur. So how to strengthen the intention according to him that there are three factors that can actually what we call as having an effect on the intention. According to Eisen, it is the attitude. Okay? So it can be positive and a negative attitude towards the behavior. The next is subjective norm. Pag sinabi nating subjective norm, that is social pressure. Meaning, if your friends are already having an iPhone and ikaw naka-Android ka pa lang, most likely, you will have such kind of pressure, which leads you to have an intention. And that is according to that particular theory. Positive or negative attitude towards buying an iPhone, subjective norm, which is social pressure, and the last is the perceived behavioral control. Meaning, gaano mo, ah, kaya mo bang bumili ng iPhone based on your perception? Or, okay? So this is what we call as the perceived behavioral control. Okay? So that is according to Eisen, that this will be the global constructs that can influence intention. And according to him, it is only the perceived behavioral control that most likely have a direct effect on the behavior. So dapat, this is our model. If that is really the theory that we wanted to explain, I mean the behavior that we wanted to explain, we can utilize this model. So it doesn't really mean that our model is just like the traditional IVDV, IV, then arrow going to the DV. So that's actually common model. But you have to understand what the theory says. And whatever the theory says, you have to illustrate that one based on the arrangement of the variables. Okay? But this is a higher statistics in the future. If you will have a training on path analysis, then you can be able to understand how to analyze this kind of framework. Okay, but I'm trying to emphasize that the relationship of the variables are based on what the theory says and what the theory is all about. And that is the conceptual framework. Okay, that's the illustration. So this is an example on the application of theory or the theoretical framework to the conceptual framework, which is the drawing of the theory. Oh, okay. For the research design, this is in the method section already of the proposal. I just emphasize here the guide questions. Para these guide questions shall help you write the content of your proposal. Kumbaga, kung meron kayong answer nito sa proposal ninyo, meaning you are in good direction. So method is actually a way for me, if I will review a research, I always look at the method, okay, first. Because the method will give us an idea whether the research is a good science or a bad science. So if there is no standardization in the method, then of course, that is not acceptable. So that is why when you write the method, it should be coming from standards. Okay? Kung mag-experiment ka, you have standards when it comes to doing the experimentation. If you want to do a survey, then of course, the tool that you will be using follows standardization process, the sampling technique, the computation of your sample size. So it should be properly established. So what are the guide questions when you write the research design? Okay. These are the guide questions. What is the design of your study? Okay. Then what is the use of that design based from literature? And how this design is implemented in your study? So um, these particular questions are very important so that it's very easy to understand, okay, the appropriateness, okay, of your design to the study that you are uh, conducting. Okay, so for example, you have the research design. Yan. So this study, what is the design? This study will utilize the descriptive. Kasi, di ba kanina, quantitative design, descriptive, comparative, correlational. Dalawa kasi tayo. Meron tayong descriptive question that starts with what? And meron din tayong correlation question, the significant relationship. Descriptive, correlational, research, design. Okay? So you can see it's just a direct statement. Then what is that particular design? So the descriptive design, okay, is used, okay, to determine the status, the current status and characteristics, okay, variables. You cite the author, kunyari, Creswell, 2007, okay? On the other hand, the correlational design, kasi dalawa. So you have to include them. Determine the relationship, determine the association between two or more variables. Yeah. So you can cite the author. Sikat naman talaga ito si Creswell. Okay, something like that. Then what's the next question? How this design will be implemented in the study. So in this study, the levels of burnout, self-awareness. We wanted to know the levels. That is the current status. Okay. Burnout, self-awareness, and psychological well-being. Anong status ng teachers? Okay. Will be investigated. Ayan. Furthermore, the relationship between these variables will also be explored. Yan. So at least we have already have ganyan lang pagkasulat. Kasi journal type, journal format lang naman tayo. So what's the next? So you just have to answer the guide question. After research design, participants. Okay, so I always place guide questions para you can already have a basis for the on how to write portions in the methodology. Who are the participants of your study? How many? Sample size and how they are selected, sampling technique. Okay, so you just have to answer that. Okay, participants. So who are the participants? The teachers in higher education institution will be the participants of this study. Using the Slovin's formula from an estimated population of 2,000 teachers in the region. Okay, so kunyari nagtanong ka na sa CHED, ilan yung anong tawag dyan, teachers. So you have to explain ano yung way of solving the sample size. There are a lot. We have Cochrane, we have the Yamanis formula or the Slovin's formula. Okay, in the region with 95% 95% confidence level, total of 300, kunyari 302. Example lang ito but I'm not computing the slow beans. Samples are needed. Yan. Respondents are needed. Okay, so that's how to answer. There are a lot of ways to determine the sample size. You can use the census for smaller population. You can use you can cite studies or literatures with most likely identical study as yours in the selection of participants. So you can just cite the author. You can use published tables kasi usually meron yan siya sa mga literatures na kunyari meron kang 1,000 population, you just need 300 plus. So you just have to cite the author if that is published table. You can use the sample size formula, the Cochrane, the Yamanis formula. You can do the power sampling, and then there are actually many ways to measure the sample size. And then you can use the different online calculators like Rausoft sample size calculator. So pwede naman talaga yan siya. Like for example, okay, you can type in yan. This is the Rausoft online calculator. So margin of error usually 5% in a survey type. Confidence level are usually set at 95% with 5% error. In a population size of 20,000, kunyari 2,000 lang, okay, we need, the recommended sample size is 323. So kung ganyan ang gagamitin ko, then using the Rausoft calculator ang ilagay ko dito. Rausoft online calculator. So dito pala is 323 respondents are needed. Okay? So the next is the sampling technique. Okay? There are a lot of sampling technique. We have of two types. We have the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling. Probability sampling, this should be the expectation because especially when you do inferential tests, you need to perform probability sampling. There should be randomization. That's probability. The sampling should be randomized to avoid biases, to avoid prejudices. Like for example, simple random sampling, the lottery method. For example, in a class, you write the names of the students in your class in a paper, you place in the container, and when you compute at least 20 sample size, you randomly select 20 names from the paper that you have placed in the container. So that is simple random sampling. We have also systematic sampling. It will have a system of selection for every nth of the population. So for example, in your class record, you select only those in the even numbers, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That is a system of selection. So those students who will fall at even numbers, then they are the respondents of your study. So we have simple stratified random sampling. If there is a strata, kung gusto mo may representative sa, kunyari, senior high school, merong sa grade 11, meron din sa grade 12. So that is a stratified random sampling. After you determine the sample size per strata, you do simple random sampling per grade level. So for example, na determine mo na yung computation na 20 for grade 11 and 30 for grade 12 based on their total population. After determining the sample size per grade level, you do simple random sampling to select the 20 and to select the 30 in grade 12. So that is stratified random sampling. But in a bigger population, then you have to perform anong tawag diyan, yung mga cluster sampling or multi-stage sampling. So multi-stage usually ito yung ginagawa for SWS survey. But we have also non-probability sampling, which is a weaker sampling technique because there is no randomization. Like for example, convenient sampling by the convenience of the researcher. We have also the purposive sampling or judgment sampling based on the characteristics that you want as participants of the study. So you have to have an inclusion criteria, like those teachers um, with at least 3 years experience as faculty in a higher education institution will be the respondents of the study. So your exclusion, those with experience lower than 3 years, will not be included as respondents of the study. So that's purposive sampling. You have criteria of selection. And then we have quota sampling, and at the same time we have also snowball sampling or referral sampling. So by referral, kunyari na interview mo na siya, you can ask him of a referral with same characteristics as the one that you have interviewed. So that is snowball sampling. So after this sample size, you have to place here your sampling technique. Okay? So the purposive sampling, ayan, pwede mo ilagay the purposive sampling will be used um, in obtaining this technique. Okay, this technique. So you will emphasize what is purposive sampling. We use in selecting the respondents. Okay. So this technique is used to, so you have to define based on the literature. You have to cite the author. Yan. Like 2002. So to attain homogeneity, homogeneity, the following criteria. Kunyari, non-probability sampling ang gamitin natin. Okay? So, you have to place here the criteria kasi nga, purposive sampling ang ginamit mo. Okay? So, that's how to write uh, the participant section. Who are the respondents, the teachers? How many? 323 based on Slovin's formula. How they are selected? Purposive sampling. Okay. Then instruments. Okay. So in the instrument, it should be an adapted instrument if you are utilizing the quantitative research. So the instrument must be valid and reliable. Okay. And there should be an author on that. And at the same time, the results of validity and reliability measure. Kasi there are a lot of validity. Hindi lang naman content, wala namang measurement, wala namang statistics ang content validity. But we have construct validity. Okay? Usually in a factor analysis, nandyan na yung results of the construct validity. Then we have also the reliability, the internal consistency results like the Cronbach's alpha. So that is the reliability. And for qualitative, we will be utilizing the interview guide questions. Okay, it shall be prepared by the researcher. So in the interview guide, you have a main question and you should have a probing questions. So, kunyari, what are the challenges that you have encountered during the delivery of online lessons? So that is your main question. Then you should have a probing you should have probing questions or follow-up question. Okay, like um, how effective is your approach? Okay, so how do you feel about this difficulty in conducting lecture? So meron ka ng additional question to extract more details coming from the participants. But in the qualitative research, of course, you should have trustworthiness of the study, the credibility, dependability, transferability. Okay, so this particular apat yan siya, that trustworthiness can actually decrease the subjectivity. Okay, the subjectivity of your research. Kasi sometimes itong qualitative research are actually even Creswell really said that it is a subjective type of research. So that is why you have to establish the trustworthiness of your study, the credibility, dependability, confirmability, and transferability. So these are important components that you have to emphasize or establish in qualitative research. In quantitative research, kasi maraming participants and the tools are standardized, so we can draw a conclusion. So in a qualitative research, we cannot draw a conclusion here. We can have just only implications, okay, of the results or the findings. You cannot generalize your finding in a qualitative research. So you don't need a lot of participants, and ang kailangan mo lang dito is that the participants must be selected on those who can really give you the exact information that you need for your study. So ito yung mga tinatawag mo na um, the one that you have that you will be interviewing, okay? And then these particular participants, until such time that when you probe, when you do follow-up question, pabalik-balik na ang answer, and that is now the saturation point, meaning there's no more additional information that you need kasi nabigay na nila lahat. That is why the skill that you need in a qualitative research is that you should have a good skill in probing or doing follow-up question in a qualitative research. Unlike in the quantitative, you have tools. Okay, kung laboratory, meron mga device, equipments to gather data. Kung survey naman, you have questionnaire to gather data from the respondents. So, ang gagawin mo sa instrument portion, you have to write um, the tool. Okay, hindi pala ito. You have to write okay. So you have to place here burnout inventory. And this tool is adapted from study of Christensen, 2017, which measures the, the physical and psychological exhaustion employees. It has, yeah. So you just have to describe the tool. What does it measure? So it measures the physical and psychological exhaustion. Okay. How is it measured? It is in a 5-point Likert scale type from 5, strongly agree, always, 1, never. Okay. The front box, uh, the front box alpha value, the construct is 0.82, which is considered as having better internal consistency. So, ganyan. So, then next, pwede naman i-describe yung self-awareness inventory. Okay? Ano yung pangalan ng scale na yan? You have to discuss each of that scale. To where you adapted that, what does it measure, and how is it measured? Okay? So that's how to make write the portion of your instrument. And you have the procedures. Ito, wala namang problema ito. You just have to write the data gathering procedure. Okay? Write only the data gathering procedure. How do you gather the data? Asking permission, so something like that. And then after getting the data, so post data gathering, what will you do? You tabulate, analyze, and interpret the results. So ilagay mo lang, i-paragraph form mo lang. You don't need to have a lot of paragraphs. You just have to have this one paragraph. And then the last is the data analysis. So kasi statistics ito. So you have to specify the appropriate statistics, okay? Like mean and standard deviation will be used to determine the levels of burnout, then self-awareness, and psychological well-being. And you can place, moreover, the Pearson product moment correlation will be used to determine the relationship between the variables. Furthermore, the multiple regression analysis will be employed to determine the influence of burnout and self-awareness on the psychological well-being. And then, lastly, we have references. So, isa yan siya sa component. So, the references, you have to use the APA. I think the latest is 7th edition format.